You ever have one of those moments where reality seems to bend, where you're standing in a room full of people but you're the only one who doesn't understand what's going on? That was me, hooked up to N4, barely able to keep my eyes open as the nurse at my bedside nodded along to something my wife was saying. I could hear her voice, calm but clipped, telling the nurse that she was my ex-wife and only here out of moral obligation. The words slid into my head like a shard of glass. Ex-wife. We had gone to bed together the night before. We'd eaten breakfast together that morning. As far as I knew, we were happily married. But the way she said it, without a flicker of hesitation, without looking at me, made my stomach churn. And right there, before I could speak, before I could even protest, the nurse's whole demeanor toward me changed, like I'd been quietly recategorized in her mind as someone broken, someone abandoned. And I know, you're already asking yourself, was it a lie? Was it the truth? Was I losing my mind? Trust me, I was asking myself the same thing, and in this video you are going to get the answer to the question that made me feel like I was living inside someone else's life. You're here for a reason. You saw the title, you clicked because something about it tugged at that part of your brain that can't look away from a puzzle, and I'm telling you right now, the pieces to this one are all here. But I'm warning you, the moment you think you've figured it out, you're going to realize there's something else just out of sight that changes everything. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old air. The beeping of machines was steady, almost hypnotic, and I could feel the weight of the sheets pinning me to the bed. My head throbbed with a dull ache that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I didn't even remember how I'd gotten there, just flashes of motion, bright lights, voices calling my name. And then my wife, standing at the foot of my bed in her navy blue coat, her hair pulled back the way she wore it when she didn't want me to touch her. She had her arms crossed and that look on her face, the one that was impossible to read. And she told them without a hint of shame, "We're divorced. I'm not even supposed to be here." The nurse gave her a tight smile and scribbled something down, and I lay there, too weak to sit up, staring at the woman I'd shared my life with and wondering if she had just erased our marriage in a single sentence. You see, this isn't just about the shock of hearing those words. It's about the slow, creeping fear that maybe she wasn't lying. Maybe something had happened to me, something big, something I couldn't remember, and the fact that I couldn't remember made it real in its own way. I want you to picture yourself there, in that bed, your mouth dry, your head pounding, every muscle in your body screaming for rest. And the one person who's supposed to love you, who's supposed to fight for you, is telling strangers that you're not hers anymore. That's not just betrayal. That's the kind of moment that burrows into your chest and makes you question everything you know. Now, I could have let it go. I could have told myself she was mistaken or angry or just trying to protect herself. But there was something in her eyes that told me it wasn't that simple. It was colder than anger, more deliberate than a mistake. She wanted the nurses to believe her. She wanted me to believe her. And as I lay there, forcing my thoughts through the fog in my head, I realized that if she had gone so far as to tell the staff we were divorced, then whatever was going on wasn't new. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment cruelty. This was planned. The nurse adjusted my drip and leaned over to ask me a few questions. My name, the date, where I was. My answers came out in a shaky voice, but they were all correct. At least I thought they were. The nurse glanced at my wife, or ex-wife I guess, as if she was waiting for her to confirm or deny my reality. She didn't even look at me when she said, "He's confused. It's been like this for a while." That cut deeper than anything else because suddenly I could see the narrative she was building. I wasn't just a patient anymore, I was an unreliable narrator in my own life. And the more she spoke for me, the more the staff seemed to take her word as truth. And here's the thing. When you're in that position, when people start to question your version of events, you start to question yourself. It's like the walls of your memory start to bend, and you can't tell if you're remembering the truth or just a story you've been telling yourself for years. The human brain is fragile, and I could feel mine starting to crack under the weight of her words. I had to know, why was she doing this? What did she gain from it? And why did it feel like everyone in that room already knew something I didn't? That's when I caught it, the smallest flicker of something in her expression. Not guilt. Not pity. But fear. She was afraid of something, and for the first time, I wondered if this wasn't about me at all. If you've ever been in a situation where the person you trust most suddenly changes the rules without warning, you know that the not knowing is worse than anything else. And that's exactly where I was. My mind was clawing at every corner of my memory, looking for an answer, a reason, anything to explain what was happening, and coming up empty. But here's where you and I make a deal. You stay with me right here through every twist and turn, and I'll walk you straight to the truth. I'll show you the conversations, the hidden messages, the moments when it all started to unravel, and when we get to the end you'll see the whole picture. But I'm warning you, it's not the ending you're expecting. This is the kind of truth that doesn't just answer your questions, it changes the questions you're asking. And just when I thought I was ready to push for answers, to make her tell me why she was doing this, the doctor walked in. He glanced at my chart, then at her, and then he smiled. Not at me. At her. Like they'd shared some unspoken agreement before I even woke up. That's when I knew, this went deeper than just her. And if I wanted to know what was really happening, I was going to have to play along until I could find a way out. But the problem was, I wasn't sure if I was in a hospital to get better, or if I was there so I'd never leave. When the doctor stepped into the room, the air shifted in a way that made my skin prickle. He was a tall man with a calm, almost detached demeanor, flipping casually through my chart as though my life story was nothing more than a set of numbers and scribbles on a clipboard. But it was the way he greeted my wife, with that faint, knowing smile, that made my pulse spike. It wasn't the polite kind of smile you give to a patient's relative. It was more like recognition, a familiarity that hinted at something they'd shared without me. She didn't even look surprised to see him, which told me this wasn't the first time they'd crossed paths. I tried to speak, to ask what was going on, but my throat felt raw and dry, and the only sound I could make was a weak rasp. The doctor placed a reassuring hand on my arm, the way people do when they're trying to keep you calm, and said in that measured tone, "You've been through a lot. Right now, it's best to focus on recovery." Recovery from what? The question rang in my head, but no one seemed in any hurry to answer it. The days that followed blurred together, a mix of drowsy afternoons, muted conversations I wasn't meant to hear, and the constant low hum of machines. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and catch the sound of footsteps outside my door, or the faint creak of it opening just enough for a shadow to slip inside before leaving again. I started to notice little details that didn't fit. My phone was nowhere to be found, my wallet was missing, and whenever I asked for my personal belongings, the staff would give vague responses or change the subject. The more I paid attention, the more I realized I was being kept in a bubble, fed just enough information to keep me docile but never enough to truly understand where I stood. And all the while my wife, or whatever she wanted me to think she was, kept up her role, visiting just long enough to check something off a mental list, then leaving without a backward glance. It was like I'd been erased from the life I thought we shared, reduced to a responsibility she was reluctantly fulfilling. Memories from before the hospital started to surface in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. I remembered an argument in the kitchen about a week before, her voice sharp, mine louder than I'd meant, but I couldn't recall what it had been about. I remembered her phone ringing late at night and her stepping outside to answer it, whispering in a tone that made my chest tighten. And then there was the image of an unfamiliar envelope on the counter with my name on it, which I never got to open. These fragments kept circling in my mind, but every time I tried to push them into a clear timeline, something in my head seemed to fog over, like a door slamming shut just when I was about to walk through. The frustration was maddening, but it also fueled something inside me, a quiet determination to dig beneath whatever facade she and the doctor were presenting. It was during one of the quieter afternoons that I overheard the first real crack in their story. My door had been left slightly ajar, and I heard my wife speaking to someone in the hallway. Her tone was urgent but controlled, the way you talk when you don't want to be overheard but you need to get your point across. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught fragments. "Not yet, he doesn't remember, keep it that way." My heart began pounding and I strained to hear more, but then footsteps approached and the voices dropped lower. A nurse came in moments later, all smiles, adjusting my fore as though she hadn't just been part of a conversation about me. I wanted to ask what they were hiding, but I bit back the urge. Something told me that asking too many questions would only make them more careful, and I needed them to underestimate me. The more I stayed quiet, the more they seemed to let things slip. One afternoon, a new nurse brought in my chart by mistake and left it on the counter while she stepped out. I couldn't reach it from the bed, but from where I was, I could read just enough upside down to see words that made my stomach twist. Head trauma. Amnesia suspected. Unreliable account of events. In the space where a spouse's information should have been, there was nothing. No name, no emergency contact. As far as that chart was concerned, I was a man alone in the world. That was when it hit me that my wife's lie wasn't just personal. She'd made it official, institutional. She'd rewritten my identity in the one place that mattered most while I was too weak to fight it. In the middle of all this, another thread began to emerge. A woman I'd never seen before started appearing in the hallway outside my room. She never came in, never spoke to me, but I'd catch her lingering near the nurse's station, watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. She was younger than my wife, with dark hair and an expression that shifted between concern and hesitation. The first time our eyes met, she looked startled and walked away quickly. But she came back the next day and the day after that. There was something in her gaze that felt almost familiar, though I couldn't place why. One night, I woke to find a folded piece of paper tucked under my pillow. There was no name, just a single sentence written in small, hurried handwriting. Asterisk, don't believe her. She's not who you think she is. Asterisk, my chest tightened as I read it over and over, the words burning into me. Whoever had left it had taken a risk, and that meant they knew something, maybe the truth, maybe just enough of it to light a fire under me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the hallway made me tense, every shadow stretching under the door made me wonder if someone was coming to take the note back. I tucked it into the waistband of my hospital pants just in case. My mind was racing. If my wife wasn't who I thought she was, then who was she? And what had she been doing all those years we were together that I never noticed? The more I thought about it, the more I began to question the memories we'd built together. Were they even real, or had she been building this distance for months, maybe years, while I stayed blind to it? The idea that my life could have been manipulated for so long without me knowing made my skin crawl. By the next morning, the mystery woman in the hallway was gone, and for 2 days I didn't see her again. My wife, on the other hand, started visiting more frequently, staying longer, watching me with a kind of calculated interest that made me feel like I was under a microscope. She'd ask small, seemingly harmless questions. What I remembered about our last vacation, what I thought our anniversary date was, and every time I answered she'd smile faintly as though mentally marking something off a list. I realized she wasn't here out of guilt or obligation. She was here to see how much I knew and maybe to make sure I didn't know more than I should. It was on the third day that I saw the mysterious woman again, but this time she didn't linger in the hallway. She slipped into my room while my wife was gone, closing the door quickly behind her. Her voice was low but urgent as she told me she didn't have much time. She didn't give me her name, didn't explain who she was, but she said something that made my blood run cold. You were supposed to be gone. She made sure of it. If you're still here, it means something went wrong. Before I could ask what she meant, the sound of footsteps in the hall made her freeze. She shoved a small key into my hand, whispered, "Hide it," and slipped out the door without another word. I stared at that key for a long time after she left, turning it over in my palm, wondering what it could possibly unlock, and whether I wanted to know. Because whatever was happening, whatever game I'd been dragged into, it was clear now that it wasn't just about a marriage. This was something bigger. And the deeper I dug, the more certain I became that the truth was going to be a lot darker than I was ready for. And that was before I discovered what she'd hidden in my hospital file. The key burned in my hand like a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to keep, and yet I couldn't stop touching it, turning it over in my palm whenever no one was looking. It was small and brass, worn smooth as if it had been used many times before, but it didn't look like it belonged to anything in the hospital. I kept it hidden under my pillow at night and in the waistband of my gown during the day, careful never to let the nurses see me fiddling with it. I didn't know who the mysterious woman really was or why she risked slipping it to me, but every instinct I had told me it was connected to whatever my wife was hiding. And if that was true, then this little piece of metal might be the only leverage I had. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. If she said I was supposed to be gone, then what exactly had they planned for me? And how had I slipped through their fingers? 2 days passed before anything happened, and in those 2 days my wife's visits became suffocating. She'd sit in the chair by my bed, her phone always in her hand, watching me like she was waiting for me to slip up and reveal more than I meant to. She'd ask questions in that soft, concerned tone that sounded caring to anyone listening, but I could feel the trap in every one. What did I remember about the day I fell? Had I been feeling dizzy lately? Did I still have the headaches? Each time I gave her an answer, her eyes would flicker just slightly, as if she were adjusting some plan in her head. And the whole time, the doctor kept appearing in my doorway, watching our interactions as if I were a case study in human behavior rather than a man fighting to reclaim his life. Then one afternoon I caught them together in the hallway. I wasn't supposed to be up, but I'd forced myself out of bed under the excuse of needing to stretch my legs. I moved slowly, leaning on the wall, making it look like a painful effort, but my ears were tuned in to the sound of their voices. My wife's tone was sharper than I'd ever heard it, hissing at him to move things up because he's starting to remember. The doctor kept his voice low, almost too low to catch, but I heard enough. We can't risk it, not until we know if the files are secure. My pulse jumped. Files. The word rang in my head and instantly I thought about the key. Could it be connected? I wanted to step closer, but before I could, my wife spotted me. Her expression smoothed into that concerned mask she always wore around me, and she rushed over to guide me back to my room like nothing had happened. That night the hospital felt different. The hallways were quieter, the lights dimmer, and the usual background noise seemed muted, as if the whole building was holding its breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, and that's when I heard it, the faint scrape of paper sliding under my door. My heart pounded as I reached for it, my hands trembling. It was another note, but this time it was typed, the words stark against the white page. Asterisk, if you want to know the truth, use the key. Room 413. Midnight. Asterisk, there was no signature, no explanation, but the instructions were clear. I glanced at the clock. I had just over an hour. When midnight came, I slipped out of bed, every muscle in my body tense with the effort to stay quiet. The halls were almost completely dark, lit only by the occasional emergency light. My bare feet made no sound on the cold linoleum as I moved past closed doors, praying no one would catch me. Room 413 was on the far end of the wing, and as I approached it, I saw that it wasn't a patient's room at all. It was unmarked, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. My hands shook as I took out the key, half expecting it not to fit, but the lock turned easily, and the door swung open with a low creak. Inside, the air was cold and dry, and the faint smell of dust told me no one came in here often. Against the far wall stood a metal filing cabinet, tall and dented, with a small brass lock on the top drawer. My chest tightened as I slid the key in and turned it. The drawer opened with a reluctant groan, revealing thick folders stuffed with papers and photographs. I started flipping through them, my eyes scanning quickly until I froze. There it was, my name printed neatly on a tab. I pulled the folder out, my stomach twisting as I saw page after page of detailed notes about me, not just medical history but personal details I'd never shared with anyone but my wife. Dates, financial records, even photographs from years ago that I didn't remember being taken. And then, near the back, was something that made my blood run cold, a document titled Transfer Authorization, with my name on it, and a signature that looked disturbingly like my wife's. I didn't know what it was transferring me to, but every part of me screamed that it wasn't good. I was so focused on the papers that I didn't hear the footsteps until they were right behind me. A voice spoke softly, almost kindly, and I felt the hairs on my neck rise. I told you not to come here. I turned, and there she was, the mysterious woman from the hallway, her eyes wide with something between fear and urgency. You don't have time, she whispered. They already know you're gone. I wanted to ask her what the transfer meant, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. If you stay here you won't make it out, she said, her voice breaking just slightly. And then she dropped the real bombshell. She's not just lying to you. She's not your wife at all. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. My mind reeled, every memory I had of the woman I thought I knew suddenly under suspicion. I wanted to demand answers, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, a part of me had already suspected it. The familiar smile, the shared history, how much of it had been real, and how much had been crafted to keep me exactly where I was. I barely had time to process the thought before the sound of running footsteps echoed down the hallway, and the woman's grip on my arm tightened. We have to move now, she hissed. Or it's over. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have imagined, was that leaving that room wasn't going to save me. It was going to pull me straight into something much darker, something that would make the hospital feel like the safest place I'd ever been. And it all started the moment we turned that first corner. We moved quickly through the darkened hallway, the mysterious woman leading me like she'd memorized every turn. My bare feet slapped against the cold floor, my breath loud in my ears, the adrenaline making my head pound. Behind us, the sound of footsteps was growing louder, closer, until it felt like they were right on our heels. She pulled me into a side corridor and pressed me against the wall, her hand gripping my wrist so tightly it almost hurt. In the dim light, I could finally see her face clearly. There was a familiarity in her eyes, not the kind that comes from knowing someone for years, but the kind that comes from sharing something intense, something dangerous. Listen to me, she whispered, her voice shaking. Everything you think you know about her is a lie. She's not your wife and she never was. They put her in your life years ago to watch you, to make sure you didn't remember who you really are. My chest tightened, my thoughts spinning. Who I really am? I managed to whisper back, but she just shook her head. Not here. Not now. We have to get you out first. We burst through a set of double doors and into a service stairwell, the echo of our footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls. The air was cooler here, and for a brief second I thought maybe we'd lost them, until the door above us slammed open. She cursed under her breath and pulled me down the stairs faster, my legs screaming with the effort. We hit the bottom and pushed through into what looked like a storage area, shelves stacked high with boxes and medical supplies. She led me to a locked door at the far end and took out a small ring of keys, her fingers moving with the speed of someone who's done this before. The lock clicked and she shoved me inside. It wasn't until the door closed behind us that I realized we were in an underground parking garage. There, she said, pointing to a dark sedan parked in the far corner. We have one shot. Once we're out of here, I'll explain everything. I climbed into the passenger seat, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. As soon as she started the engine, headlights flared behind us, another car blocking the exit. I felt a rush of cold fear as I recognized the silhouette stepping out into the light. It was her, the woman I'd believed was my wife. She stood there calmly, her hands folded in front of her, as if she'd been expecting this exact moment. The mysterious woman cursed and floored the gas, but before we could reach the exit, the other car swerved, forcing us to a stop. My not wife walked slowly toward us, her expression unreadable. She stopped just outside my window, leaning down until her face was inches from mine. You don't want to do this, she said softly, almost kindly. There are things you don't remember, and for your own safety, it's better that way. Before I could respond, the mysterious woman leaned across me and shouted, "He deserves to know the truth." That's when my not wife's expression changed. Just for a second, something flickered there, not anger but sadness. "If he remembers," she said quietly, "they'll come for him. And you can't protect him from that." Her words hung in the air like a warning I didn't understand. Then, without another word, she stepped back, and the car blocking us suddenly reversed, giving us just enough room to slip past. The mysterious woman didn't hesitate, she hit the gas and we shot out of the garage into the night. We drove for what felt like hours, the city lights giving way to empty highways and stretches of dark forest. My mind was a storm of questions, but I kept my mouth shut, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she pulled off onto a deserted road and cut the engine. The silence was almost overwhelming. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "You were part of a program," she said. "Before you ever met her, before your accident, you worked for them. You knew things, dangerous things. When you tried to leave, they erased your memory and put her in your life to keep you under control. But something went wrong and now they're afraid you'll remember." I stared at her, my throat dry, the weight of her words settling over me like a lead blanket. "And you?" I asked. "Why are you helping me?" She hesitated, then looked away. "Because once you helped me. You don't remember it, but you saved my life." The truth hit me in waves. The marriage, the hospital, the lies, all of it had been part of a much bigger plan. And yet, there was still a piece missing, something that didn't fit. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not just let them keep me in the dark?" She met my gaze again, and for the first time I saw fear there. "Because they're not just erasing memories anymore," she said quietly. "They're erasing people." The words sent a chill through me so deep I felt it in my bones. I realized then that the transfer document I'd seen in that file wasn't about moving me to another hospital. It was about making me disappear completely. We didn't have long to talk. In the distance, I saw headlights approaching, growing brighter with every second. "They found us," she said, starting the engine again. We took off down the road, the wind rushing past us, and I knew in my gut that whatever came next, I couldn't go back to my old life. Not because I didn't want to, but because it didn't exist anymore. Everything I'd thought was real had been carefully constructed, and now that I'd seen behind the curtain, there was no unseeing it. By the time dawn broke, we'd reached a small, isolated cabin deep in the woods. She told me we'd be safe here for a while, but I could see in her eyes that "safe" was a temporary word. Before she stepped outside to make a call, she handed me an envelope. "This is everything I could find about who you were," she said. "When you're ready, open it. But understand, once you know, there's no going back." I sat there, the envelope heavy in my hands, knowing it held the final pieces of the puzzle. For a long moment, I just stared at it, torn between the desperate need for answers and the fear of what those answers would mean. In the end, I opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, and a single handwritten note, from me to myself. The words were brief, but they froze me where I sat. Asterisk, if you're reading this, they've already found you. Trust no one, not even her. Asterisk, my breath caught, my mind racing as I realized the her could mean either woman, the one who'd lied to me for years or the one who'd just saved me. And that's when I understood the real nightmare wasn't losing my memory. It was knowing that even now, even after everything, I still didn't know who I could trust. Some truths, I realized, don't set you free. They just change the prison you're in. And as the wind howled through the trees outside that cabin, I knew my story wasn't over, it was just beginning.